I am Marcus Thompson, 38 years old, and I built a cryptocurrency mining empire that was worth $800 million before it all came crashing down. My business partner, James, was the smooth-talking MBA who convinced me we needed professional management. My younger brother, Ryan, was always the charmer, the one everyone loved. I never imagined they would conspire to destroy everything I built and leave me to die in the Nevada desert. The memory still burns in my mind. Ryan's cold laugh as he said, "Say goodbye to your empire, Mark," before James shoved me out of the moving SUV at 70 miles per hour into the darkness. But they never expected what happened next. Before I dive into this incredible story of betrayal and survival, let me know in the comments where you're reading from. Hit that upvote if you want to hear more shocking stories of business betrayal and impossible comebacks. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona with my brother Ryan, who is 4 years younger than me. From the beginning, we were opposites in every way. While I was methodical and obsessed with technology, Ryan was outgoing and naturally charismatic. I spent my teenage years building computers and learning about emerging technologies, while Ryan was the star quarterback who could charm anyone into anything. Our parents, both engineers at Intel, appreciated my technical skills, but clearly connected better with Ryan's social abilities. They would beam with pride at his football games and social achievements, while my programming accomplishments earned polite acknowledgement. It wasn't that they didn't love me. Ryan just had this magnetic personality that drew everyone to him, including our parents. The difference became especially apparent during family gatherings, where Ryan would regale everyone with stories from his social life, while I sat quietly, more comfortable with computers than people. I remember one particular Christmas when I was 16 and had just won a state-level programming competition. I was excited to share the news, but Ryan chose that moment to announce he'd been selected as team captain and homecoming king. The room erupted in celebration for Ryan, while my achievement became an afterthought. That night, alone in my room, I decided that if I couldn't compete with Ryan's natural charisma, I would excel in areas where charisma didn't matter. I discovered my passion for cryptocurrency when I was 19. My computer science professor at Arizona State, Dr. Williams, saw something in me that others missed. He introduced me to Bitcoin when it was still under $1 and encouraged me to think beyond traditional applications. This was 2009, and most people thought digital currency was either a scam or a novelty that would never amount to anything. "You have an intuitive understanding of complex systems, Marcus," he told me once after I'd solved a particularly challenging algorithmic problem in half the time it took other students. "Your mind sees patterns others miss. Don't let anyone convince you to think smaller." Those words became my foundation during the difficult years ahead. Dr. Williams became more than a professor. He was the mentor I'd never had. Someone who understood that success could come from dedication and intelligence rather than social popularity. College was financially challenging. I worked nights at a data center while studying computer engineering during the day. The job involved maintaining servers for various companies, which gave me hands-on experience with large-scale computing systems that would prove invaluable later. Meanwhile, Ryan received a full football scholarship to USC, with our parents covering his additional expenses without question. They bought him a car, paid for his apartment, and sent him spending money every month. I never resented this. Ryan had a gift for making everyone believe his dreams were worth investing in. He had this way of talking about his future NFL career that made it seem inevitable, and our parents bought into that vision completely. When they visited him at USC, they'd come back with stories about his teammates, his social life, and his promising athletic performance. My own college experience was starkly different. I lived in a tiny studio apartment near campus, surviving on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find at campus events. During those years, I barely had time for anything except work and study. When I wasn't at the data center or in class, I was in my small apartment, developing what would eventually become my mining algorithm. The data center job, while exhausting, gave me access to computing resources I couldn't afford on my own. Late at night, when traffic was low, I would run my experimental programs on spare server capacity. It was technically against company policy, but my supervisor, a former programmer named Pete, understood what I was trying to accomplish and looked the other way. "Kid, you're working on something revolutionary," Pete told me one night as we watched my algorithm process blockchain data. "Don't let anyone tell you this cryptocurrency stuff is just a fad. I've been in tech for 20 years, and I've never seen anything with this kind of potential." I was fascinated by the possibility of creating more efficient cryptocurrency mining operations using renewable energy sources. Traditional mining operations were incredibly energy intensive, using massive amounts of electricity to power the computational processes required to verify transactions and earn cryptocurrency rewards. Most experts said renewable energy mining wasn't economically viable because solar and wind power were too expensive and unreliable. That skepticism only motivated me more. I spent months researching energy storage systems, power grid optimization, and alternative cooling methods for mining equipment. I became obsessed with the idea that cryptocurrency mining could actually help advance renewable energy adoption rather than hinder it. During my junior year, I developed a breakthrough algorithm that could dynamically adjust mining intensity based on available renewable energy, maximizing efficiency during peak solar and wind production periods while minimizing energy waste. I called it adaptive cryptocurrency mining, and it was unlike anything anyone had attempted before. After graduation, I took a position at a tech startup called Innovate Tech while continuing my cryptocurrency research in my spare time. The job paid well enough for me to move into a better apartment and finally have reliable access to high-speed internet and powerful computers. My boss, Sarah Chen, was a former Silicon Valley executive who recognized talent when she saw it. "Marcus, you're wasted in this position." She told me during my 6-month review, "You should be starting your own company, not working for someone else. What's holding you back?" I explained my financial situation and my uncertainty about business operations. Sarah introduced me to several entrepreneurs and investors in the Phoenix tech scene, helping me understand that technical innovation alone wasn't enough. I needed to learn about fundraising, business development, and scaling operations. 2 years later, I had refined my algorithm and developed a working prototype of what I called EcoMine. It was revolutionary, a complete mining system that used artificial intelligence to optimize energy consumption, predict renewable energy availability, and automatically adjust mining operations for maximum efficiency and profitability. The system could reduce energy costs by up to 40% while maintaining competitive mining output. More importantly, it made renewable energy mining economically viable for the first time. I quit my job and founded Greenhash Mining with my life savings of $45,000, working out of a rented warehouse space in an industrial area of Phoenix. The first 3 years were absolutely brutal. I was essentially running 3 different businesses simultaneously, developing the technology, building the physical mining infrastructure, and trying to convince investors cryptocurrency mining could be environmentally sustainable. Most days I worked 16 hours, sleeping on a cot in the warehouse office and surviving on energy drinks and whatever fast food I could afford. Investors were interested in the technology, but skeptical of my business experience. I heard, "Impressive innovation, but we need seasoned management," countless times. Traditional venture capitalists didn't understand cryptocurrency, and cryptocurrency investors didn't trust renewable energy claims. I was caught between 2 worlds, neither of which fully accepted what I was trying to build. The rejection was constant and demoralizing. One particularly painful meeting with a prominent VC firm ended with the lead partner telling me, "Son, you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. If renewable energy mining were viable, someone would have done it already. You're too late to the cryptocurrency game and too early to the renewable energy game." Throughout this period, Ryan was struggling to transition from college football to the professional world. His NFL dreams had ended with a devastating knee injury during his senior year at USC. The injury happened during a crucial game against Stanford, a hit that tore multiple ligaments and effectively ended his athletic career. He'd gone from being a projected 3rd-round draft pick to facing the reality that he'd never play professional football. The transition was devastating for Ryan. His entire identity had been built around being an athlete, and suddenly he was just another college graduate with limited work experience and no clear career path. He moved back to Phoenix and bounced between sales jobs, struggling to find something that gave him the same sense of purpose and recognition that football had provided. Every few months, he'd call asking for help with rent, car payments, or other expenses. Despite my own financial struggles, I always sent what I could. Sometimes it meant eating ramen for a week or skipping my own rent payment. But I couldn't stand the thought of my little brother struggling. "You're my safety net, Mark," he'd say, using the nickname only family was allowed to use. "I don't know what I'd do without my big brother. Once I get back on my feet, I'll pay you back everything, with interest." I never expected him to pay me back. Family was family, and I'd grown up believing that we looked out for each other no matter what. Mom had always told us that the Thompson brothers should stick together against the world, and I took that seriously, even when Ryan didn't seem to reciprocate. The turning point for Greenhash came in late 2017, when Bitcoin hit $10,000 and institutional interest in cryptocurrency exploded overnight. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about cryptocurrency mining, especially operations that addressed environmental concerns. The mainstream media had started covering Bitcoin's energy consumption, creating demand for more sustainable alternatives. Within 6 months, I went from struggling to get meetings to having investors call me directly. Greenhash's first major contract came from a pension fund that wanted exposure to cryptocurrency, but needed to satisfy environmental, social, and governance requirements. They commissioned a 50-megawatt mining facility powered entirely by solar energy, with our EcoMine system managing the entire operation. The success of that first major installation led to more contracts. Within 2 years, Greenhash grew from just me working out of a warehouse to over 200 employees operating mining facilities across Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. Our facilities were generating over $2 million per month in mining revenue, with profit margins that were significantly higher than traditional operations due to our energy efficiency. The company's valuation reached $150 million during our Series A funding round, led by Green Tech Ventures, a firm specializing in clean energy investments. The lead investor, Patricia Morrison, became a mentor and board member, helping me navigate the challenges of scaling a rapidly growing technology company. "Marcus, you've solved one of the biggest challenges in cryptocurrency," Patricia told me during one board meeting. "But now you need to think about building a company that can compete with the major players. That means professional management, strategic partnerships, and probably some difficult decisions about control." That advice turned out to be prophetic, though not in the way either of us anticipated. The rapid growth brought new challenges I wasn't prepared for. Managing 200 employees was completely different from working alone in a warehouse. We needed professional HR systems, legal compliance procedures, and sophisticated financial controls. I was still sleeping 4 hours a night, but now it was because I was trying to manage operations, continue technology development, and handle investor relations simultaneously. That's when I met James Patterson at a blockchain conference in Las Vegas. The conference, called Crypto Future 2019, was one of the largest gatherings of cryptocurrency entrepreneurs and investors on the West Coast. I was there to deliver a keynote presentation about sustainable mining, and James was representing Patterson Ventures, a fund that specialized in emerging technology investments. He was everything I wasn't: tall, polished, and armed with an MBA from Wharton. At 35, he had the kind of effortless confidence that comes from growing up wealthy and well-connected. His father had been a successful investment banker, and James had inherited not just money, but an extensive network of Silicon Valley contacts. As a venture capitalist specializing in emerging technologies, he approached me after my presentation with sophisticated questions about scaling operations, regulatory compliance, and international expansion opportunities. I was used to investors either not understanding the technology or trying to push me out of my own company. James seemed genuinely interested in both the business potential and supporting my vision as the founder. "Marcus, what you've built is impressive, but it's just the beginning," he told me during our first coffee meeting the next day. "The real opportunity isn't just mining cryptocurrency more efficiently, it's building the infrastructure for the entire renewable energy economy. But you can't do that alone." He had a compelling vision for how Greenhash could expand beyond mining into energy storage, grid management, and even electric vehicle charging infrastructure. His presentation included detailed market analysis, competitive positioning, and financial projections that made my head spin. It was the kind of strategic thinking I knew I needed, but had never had time to develop. "You're brilliant at the technology side," he told me during our third meeting, held at an exclusive restaurant in Scottsdale. "But you need someone who understands how to build a billion-dollar company. Let me handle the business operations while you focus on innovation." James pursued a partnership aggressively, calling me daily with new ideas and sending detailed proposals for how we could work together. He offered not just funding, but operational expertise, industry connections, and the kind of business development resources that would have taken me years to build independently. What impressed me most was that he seemed to understand both the technology and the market opportunity better than any other investor I'd met. He asked intelligent questions about our algorithms, understood the energy industry dynamics, and had connections with potential customers and partners I'd never been able to reach. Our partnership progressed rapidly. Within 3 months, we negotiated a complex deal where James would join as chief operating officer with a significant equity stake, and his fund would lead a $100 million Series B funding round. The investment would allow us to expand operations to multiple states and begin developing the additional technologies James had envisioned. The legal negotiations were intense, involving multiple law firms and weeks of due diligence. James insisted on certain governance provisions that would give him significant authority over business operations, though I would retain control over technology development and overall strategic direction. "It's standard for institutional investors," my attorney explained when I questioned some of the provisions. "They want to ensure professional management and accountability. As long as you maintain majority voting control, your position as founder and CEO is secure." I trusted my attorney's judgment and James's apparent expertise. The $100 million investment was more money than I'd ever imagined having access to, and James's business plan for using it was compelling. We would build facilities in 6 states, develop energy storage capabilities, and potentially expand internationally within 3 years. Ryan was struggling financially again around this time, having been laid off from his latest sales job when his company downsized. He was back to living in a small apartment and driving a car that broke down regularly. When I told him about the Series B funding and the company's expansion plans, he immediately asked if there might be opportunities for him at Greenhash. "I know I don't have your technical skills," he said during a family dinner at our parents' house, "but I'm good with people. I could help with business development or customer relations." It was actually James who suggested bringing Ryan into the company. During one of our planning meetings, he mentioned that family businesses often benefited from having trusted relatives in key positions, especially roles that required absolute loyalty and discretion. "Your brother has natural charisma and sales ability," James observed after meeting Ryan at a company event. "Those are exactly the skills we need for business development. Plus, having family involved shows investors that you're building something for the long term." I brought Ryan into the company as Director of Business Development, a role that played to his natural relationship building skills while giving him the stable income and career opportunity he needed. The position came with a good salary, benefits, and even a small equity stake in the company. "You won't regret this," Ryan told me, hugging me tightly at his welcome dinner. "Family first, always. I'm going to work harder than anyone to help build this company." I believed him completely. Having Ryan as part of the team felt like completing a circle. The Thompson brothers finally working together toward a common goal, with me providing the technical expertise and Ryan handling the people side of the business. The first 6 months of our expanded operation were incredibly successful. We opened new mining facilities in Nevada and Utah, both of which exceeded their projected revenue within 90 days of operation. Our energy efficiency improvements continued to outperform traditional mining operations, and we were generating significant media attention as a leader in sustainable cryptocurrency mining. James proved to be everything he'd promised as a business partner. He streamlined our operations, negotiated favorable contracts with energy providers, and established relationships with major cryptocurrency exchanges that improved our profit margins. Under his management, our monthly revenue grew from $2 million to over $8 million within a year. Ryan also excelled in his new role. His natural charisma made him popular with clients and partners, and he had a gift for explaining our technology in terms that non-technical people could understand. He secured several major contracts, including a partnership with a renewable energy developer that wanted to co-locate mining operations with their solar installations. Ryan's been instrumental in our growth, James told me during one of our monthly review meetings. He has exactly the right personality for building relationships with institutional clients. You made a smart decision bringing him into the company. I felt validated in both decisions, partnering with James and hiring Ryan. For the first time in my life, I had a team I could trust to handle the aspects of business that weren't my strengths, allowing me to focus on technology development and long-term strategic planning. James integrated himself into every aspect of Greenhash operations. He restructured our corporate governance, established new banking relationships with several major institutions, and even suggested modifications to our employee benefit programs to attract better talent. His background in finance and operations management addressed gaps I hadn't even realized existed in our company structure. More importantly, he handled investor relations with a sophistication I couldn't match. Our quarterly board meetings became professionally managed presentations with detailed financial analysis, competitive intelligence, and strategic roadmaps that impressed even our most demanding investors. "Marcus, James has transformed this company's operational maturity," Patricia Morrison told me after one particularly impressive board presentation. "You've built revolutionary technology, but now you have the management team to scale it globally." 6 months after James joined as COO, he suggested I consider making him co-CEO to better attract institutional investors and international partners. The proposal came during a strategic planning retreat at a resort in Sedona, where James had arranged for us to spend 3 days developing our 5-year growth plan. "The cryptocurrency industry is maturing rapidly," he explained, showing me data about how other successful companies had structured their leadership teams. Institutional investors prefer to see professional management structures, especially for companies seeking international expansion. Co-CEO arrangements are becoming standard for technology companies at our stage of growth. I hesitated at this request, and for the first time, I saw a flash of irritation in his eyes. It was subtle but unmistakable, a momentary crack in his otherwise perfectly controlled demeanor. "Of course, it's your company," he said quickly, his expression returning to its usual friendly professionalism. "I just want to maximize our growth potential. You built something incredible here, and I want to make sure we're positioned for the opportunities ahead." I appreciated his apparent respect for my position as founder, not realizing it was merely a strategic retreat. James was too smart to push too hard too fast, but the seed had been planted. Over the following weeks, he brought up the co-CEO idea, indirectly through other channels. Board members mentioned conversations they'd had with James about leadership structure. Potential partners asked about our management team composition. Even Ryan mentioned hearing from clients who were curious about our executive hierarchy. "It might not be a bad idea, Mark," Ryan told me during one of our regular lunch meetings. "James has really proved himself, and having co-CEOs might make us look more professional to the big institutional clients." The pressure was subtle, but persistent. Eventually, I agreed to discuss the possibility with our attorneys and board members, though I insisted that any arrangement would preserve my final decision-making authority over technology and strategic direction. Then came the acquisition offer that changed everything. Crypto Global, one of the largest blockchain companies in the world, approached us through their corporate development team with an initial inquiry about potential partnership opportunities. Crypto Global operated mining facilities across 12 countries and was looking to improve their environmental profile through renewable energy partnerships. The initial meetings were presented as partnership discussions, but it quickly became apparent that Crypto Global was more interested in acquiring our entire operation than just licensing our technology. Their CEO, David Chen, was a former Goldman Sachs executive who had built Crypto Global into a $10 billion company through a combination of technological innovation and aggressive acquisitions. "What you've built is exactly what the industry needs," Chen told me during our first meeting at Crypto Global's headquarters in San Francisco. "But the real value isn't just the current operations. It's the potential to transform how the entire cryptocurrency industry approaches energy consumption." Crypto Global's formal acquisition offer was $800 million, more money than I'd ever imagined. The number was staggering, representing not just financial security, but validation that the technology I developed in my small warehouse had real value on a global scale. My board, now heavily influenced by James's strategic thinking, urged me to seriously consider the offer. James prepared detailed analysis showing how the acquisition would benefit all stakeholders. Employees would receive significant payouts from their equity, investors would realize substantial returns, and I would have the resources to pursue even more ambitious technology projects. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," James argued during a board meeting dedicated to discussing the offer. "Crypto Global has the resources to scale our technology globally within 2 years instead of 10, and the acquisition price reflects the true value of what you've built." Patricia Morrison was more cautious, advising me to consider the non-financial implications of selling the company I'd built from nothing. "Marcus, this is ultimately your decision. You've created something revolutionary, but you need to decide whether you want to continue leading it independently or become part of someone else's vision." The decision was agonizing. Part of me wanted to maintain independence and continue building Greenhash according to my own vision, but the practical benefits of the acquisition were undeniable. Immediate financial security, access to Crypto Global's global infrastructure, and the ability to scale our environmental impact much faster than we could achieve alone. After weeks of negotiation, I agreed to the acquisition, with conditions that protected my core team and ensured our technology would be used responsibly. The deal structure included significant retention bonuses for key employees, guarantees about maintaining our environmental standards, and a provision that I would remain as president of Greenhash's operations within the larger Crypto Global organization. The day the deal closed was surreal. I attended the signing ceremony at Crypto Global's headquarters, surrounded by attorneys, investment bankers, and executives. When David Chen handed me the final contracts to sign, I thought about the journey from working nights at a data center to selling my company for $800 million. James organized a celebration that evening at his mansion in Scottsdale. The party was attended by our employees, board members, and key partners, everyone who had contributed to Greenhash's success. As we toasted with expensive champagne, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the team that had helped make this possible. During the celebration, I caught an odd look between James and Ryan. It was brief, just a moment of silent communication that struck me as strange, but not alarming. They were both key contributors to our success, so it made sense that they would share a moment of mutual satisfaction. I was too overwhelmed by the sudden wealth to pay much attention. $800 million. The nerdy kid from Phoenix who'd worked nights to pay for college was now one of the richest entrepreneurs in Arizona. My parents, who had attended the celebration, were beaming with pride. Finally, their quiet, technical son had achieved something they could easily understand and celebrate. If only I had known what that money would cost me. The first few months after the acquisition were a honeymoon period. I remained actively involved in operations while also exploring new technology projects that Crypto Global's resources made possible. James continued as COO, now overseeing not just our original facilities, but also the integration of our technology into Crypto Global's existing operations worldwide. Ryan thrived in the expanded organization, building relationships with Crypto Global's international partners and helping establish greenhash facilities in 3 additional countries. His natural charisma translated well to global business development, and he was soon traveling regularly to Europe and Asia to negotiate partnership agreements. "This is what I was meant to do," Ryan told me during one of his brief visits back to Phoenix. "Building relationships, representing our technology on the global stage. It's like being team captain all over again, but for something that actually matters." I was happy to see Ryan finding purpose and success after struggling for so many years after his football career ended. The financial security from the acquisition had allowed him to buy a house, upgrade his lifestyle, and finally feel like he was building towards something significant. 18 months into the post-acquisition period, however, I began noticing subtle changes in both James and Ryan. The changes were small initially: missed meetings, delayed responses to messages, and an increasing number of conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. James, who had once included me in every major decision, started having meetings I wasn't invited to. When I asked about these meetings, he explained them as routine operational discussions or confidential negotiations with potential partners that required discretion until deals were finalized. "You're focused on the technology development," he reminded me when I expressed concern about being excluded. "These are just business operations that don't require your involvement until we're ready for final approvals." Ryan also became more distant and evasive about his activities. He was traveling more frequently, often with minimal advance notice, and when I asked about specific projects he was working on, his answers became increasingly vague. "I'm working on some really exciting partnerships," he would say, "but I can't discuss details until the legal teams finish their preliminary work." Most concerning, I started receiving questions from our accounting department about financial irregularities, large transfers to offshore consulting companies, professional service fees for organizations I'd never heard of, and expense reports for travel and entertainment that seemed excessive, even for international business development. When I asked James about these expenses, he explained them as legitimate costs associated with expanding into new markets and maintaining relationships with international partners. "Marcus, we're operating in 12 countries now," he said, showing me spreadsheets of costs and revenue projections. "The expense structure is necessarily more complex than when we were just a Phoenix-based company. These are all approved expenditures for business development and legal compliance in various jurisdictions." His explanations were plausible and detailed enough that I initially accepted them. But something about his defensive tone when discussing financial matters made me increasingly uncomfortable. The first concrete evidence that something was seriously wrong came 6 months after the acquisition, when I received a call from our primary bank requesting confirmation of a $50 million wire transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands. "Mr. Thompson, this transfer was authorized by your CFO using your corporate signature authorization," the bank representative explained. "But our fraud detection systems flagged it due to the amount and destination. Can you confirm this transaction is legitimate?" I had no knowledge of any transaction to the Cayman Islands. When I asked James about it, he produced documentation showing the transfer was payment for acquiring cryptocurrency mining rights in Central America, an expansion project he claimed we discussed during a board meeting I'd apparently missed due to a technology conference. "Here are your notes from the meeting," he said, showing me handwritten papers that looked like my writing, but contained details I didn't remember discussing. "We agreed to move quickly on this opportunity because the regulatory window was limited." The documents looked legitimate, but I had no memory of the meeting or the decision. When I checked my calendar, there was indeed a blocked time period labeled Board Meeting, CA Expansion, but I could have sworn I'd been at a renewable energy conference in Denver that day. "Marcus, you've been working incredibly hard," James said with apparent concern. "It's possible you're experiencing some memory issues due to stress and overwork. Maybe you should consider taking some time off." His suggestion that I might be having memory problems was disturbing and seemed designed to make me question my own recollections. But I couldn't deny that my schedule had been incredibly demanding, and it was possible I'd simply forgotten about meetings and decisions made during particularly busy periods. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to our financial activities and discovered several more suspicious transactions. Consulting fees paid to companies with no clear business purpose, travel expenses for trips that didn't correspond to any projects I was aware of, and equipment purchases for facilities that didn't seem to exist in our operational reports. Most troubling, I discovered that James had been systematically transferring funds to accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore under various business justifications, Over $200 million had been moved out of our operational accounts during the 18 months since the acquisition. When I confronted him with this information, James remained calm and produced extensive documentation justifying each transfer. These are all legitimate international business expenses, he explained, spreading financial reports across his office conference table, regulatory compliance costs, partnership agreements, and infrastructure investments for our global expansion. Everything has been approved through proper channels and documented according to international accounting standards. He showed me contracts with law firms in multiple countries, partnership agreements with energy companies I'd never heard of, and equipment purchases for facilities that were supposedly under construction in various international locations. The problem is that you're not involved in day-to-day operations anymore, James continued. You've been focused on technology development, which is exactly what you should be doing. But that means you're not familiar with the business activities required to maintain our international presence. His explanation was superficially convincing, but something about the sheer volume of unexplained financial activity made me deeply uncomfortable. I decided to conduct my own investigation, starting with verifying the existence of the international partnerships and facilities James claimed to be developing. What I discovered was shocking. Most of the companies we were supposedly partnering with either didn't exist or had no record of any agreements with Greenhash or Crypto Global. The law firms we were supposedly paying for regulatory compliance had no record of providing services to our company. And the international facilities that were consuming millions in infrastructure investment appeared to exist only on paper. James had been systematically stealing from the company for over a year, creating elaborate documentation to justify transfers to accounts he controlled. Worse, when I examined the signature authorizations for these transactions, I realized that many of them had been processed using electronic signatures that didn't require my direct approval. The corporate governance changes James had implemented after joining the company had given him broad authority to execute financial transactions on behalf of the organization. While this authority was supposed to be used for routine operational expenses, he had been exploiting it to transfer massive amounts of money to offshore accounts. But the most devastating discovery was yet to come. While investigating the financial fraud, I stumbled across email communications between James and Ryan that revealed the full scope of their conspiracy. Using my administrative access to our corporate email system, I found a folder of messages between them dating back over 2 years, well before the acquisition, and even before James had joined the company. The early messages revealed that James had researched Greenhash and identified it as a target for financial exploitation months before our first meeting at the blockchain conference. Even more shocking, the email showed that James had approached Ryan first, not me. Ryan had provided inside information about our company's financial structure, growth projections, and my personal management style that James used to plan his infiltration of our organization. Marcus is brilliant with technology, but naive about business, Ryan had written in one email. He trusts people too easily and doesn't pay attention to financial details. If you can gain his confidence, you'll have almost unlimited access to company resources. James's response was equally damning. Your brother sounds perfect. Idealistic founders with valuable technology and poor business skills are exactly what I specialize in. With your inside help, we should be able to extract significant value before anyone notices. The email chain continued over months, documenting their developing plan to systematically drain the company's assets while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. They had planned the entire scheme before James ever introduced himself to me at that blockchain conference. Reading these messages, I felt physically sick. The betrayal was so comprehensive and premeditated that I could barely process it. James had never been interested in building the company or supporting my vision. He had targeted Greenhash as a sophisticated theft operation from the very beginning. And Ryan, my own brother, had been his inside accomplice from the start. The worst part was discovering how they talked about me in their private communications. Ryan described me as pathetically trusting and so focused on his technology that he'll believe any business justification you give him. James referred to me as the Mark and discussed various strategies for manipulating my decisions. In one particularly painful message, Ryan wrote, "Mark still sends me money whenever I ask for it, even when he was struggling to fund his own company. He's so desperate to be the good big brother that he'll sacrifice anything for family loyalty. We can definitely exploit that weakness." James responded, "Family loyalty is always the best angle. People will forgive almost anything from someone they love. By the time he realizes what we've done, it'll be too late to recover the assets." They had been laughing at my naivety and planning my downfall, while I believed they were helping me build something meaningful. Every family dinner with Ryan, every strategic planning session with James, every moment when I felt grateful for their support, It had all been an elaborate performance designed to steal everything I'd worked to create. But the emails revealed an even darker dimension to their plan. In recent messages, they discussed what to do about the Marcus problem, specifically how to handle the situation when I inevitably discovered their financial crimes. "He's starting to ask too many questions about the international transfers," James wrote. "We may need to accelerate our timeline." Ryan's response was chilling. "What are you suggesting? We can't just make him disappear." "Actually," James replied, "we can. I've done this before with other business partners who became problematic. Tragic accidents happen all the time, especially to people under stress who make poor decisions." They were discussing killing me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just financial fraud. They were planning to murder me to cover up their crimes and gain permanent access to whatever assets remained in the company. I immediately copied all the incriminating emails to a secure external drive and began planning my response. But I knew I had to be extremely careful. If James and Ryan suspected I had discovered their plan, they might act immediately to eliminate the threat I represented. That afternoon, Ryan called with what seemed like perfect timing. "Hey, Mark," he said, his voice carrying the same casual warmth it always had. "James wants to discuss some new expansion opportunities with you. Are you available for a meeting tomorrow evening? We thought we'd drive up to his place in Sedona to talk privately about some sensitive strategic decisions." The invitation was exactly what I expected based on their email communications. They had decided to move to the final phase of their plan, which apparently involved getting me alone in a remote location where they could stage whatever accident they had in mind. "What kind of expansion opportunities?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. "International partnerships in Kazakhstan and some renewable energy projects in Iceland," Ryan explained. "Really exciting stuff that could triple our capacity within 2 years, but James wants to discuss it away from the office because of competitive sensitivity." The response was almost word for word what James had written in one of his emails about plausible business justifications for getting me isolated. They weren't even trying to be original in their deception. "That sounds interesting," I replied. "Should I drive up separately, or do you want to ride together?" "Let's ride together," Ryan said immediately. "James has some presentations he wants to show you during the drive, and it'll give us time to discuss the strategic implications without any interruptions." I agreed to meet them at James's office at 8 p.m. the following evening, knowing full well that I was walking into a trap. But I had spent the entire day preparing for this confrontation, and I had advantages they didn't know about. First, I had copied all the incriminating emails to multiple secure locations and arranged for them to be automatically sent to law enforcement, media outlets, and key business associates if I didn't check in within 24 hours. Second, I had contacted a private security firm and arranged for discreet surveillance of James and Ryan's activities. Third, I had equipped myself with recording devices and tracking equipment that would document whatever they planned to do to me. Most importantly, I had mentally prepared myself for the possibility that my own brother and business partner were planning to kill me. The psychological preparation was perhaps the hardest part, accepting that people I loved and trusted had been systematically planning my destruction for years. When I arrived at James's office that evening, both he and Ryan were waiting with forced smiles and an elaborate presentation about international expansion opportunities. James had prepared detailed slides about mining operations in Kazakhstan and renewable energy partnerships in Iceland, complete with financial projections and implementation timelines. "Marcus, this could revolutionize our entire business model," James explained enthusiastically, clicking through slides that showed potential revenue increases of 300% within 2 years. "But we need to move quickly because the regulatory windows in both countries are limited." Ryan nodded eagerly, playing his role as the enthusiastic business development director. "I've been working on these partnerships for months, Mark. The opportunities are incredible, but we need to commit to site visits and preliminary agreements within the next few weeks." Their performance was flawless, exactly the kind of exciting business opportunity that would have captivated me under normal circumstances. If I hadn't read their emails planning my murder, I would have been genuinely excited about the expansion potential they were describing. "This looks very promising," I said, playing along with their charade. "When do you want to visit these sites?" "Actually," James said, "I've arranged for us to fly out tomorrow to visit the Kazakhstan facility. I know it's short notice, but the window for securing the regulatory approvals is closing rapidly." The timeline was clearly designed to get me out of the country where they could more easily dispose of my body without triggering immediate search efforts. But I continued playing along. "The thing is," James said carefully, "these opportunities require absolute confidentiality until we finalize the agreements. Too many people knowing about our expansion plans could create competitive problems or regulatory complications. Plus," Ryan added, Our legal team doesn't have experience with international mining regulations. These contracts were prepared by specialized attorneys in Kazakhstan who understand the specific requirements. Their insistence on avoiding normal legal review confirmed my suspicions about the document's legitimacy. But I continued playing along, wanting to see how far they would push their deception. Okay, I said finally. Let me take these home and review them tonight. I can give you an answer first thing tomorrow morning. Actually, James said, standing up abruptly, why don't we drive up to Sedona tonight as planned? I have additional information there that might help with your decision, and we can finalize everything in a more relaxed environment. The sudden pressure to leave immediately was exactly what I expected based on their email communications. They had apparently decided to accelerate their timeline, possibly because they were concerned about my hesitation to sign the documents immediately. Sure, I agreed. Should I follow you in my car? No need, Ryan said quickly. We can all ride together in James's SUV. It's more comfortable for the drive, and we can continue discussing the business opportunities. I agreed, knowing that getting into their vehicle was extremely dangerous, but trusting in the security measures I had put in place. As we walked to James's black SUV in the parking garage, I activated the GPS tracking device hidden in my shoe and sent a final message to my security team, confirming that the operation was proceeding as planned. The drive started normally, with James and Ryan maintaining their enthusiastic discussion of international expansion opportunities. They showed me additional documents and financial projections, keeping up the pretense that this was a legitimate business trip until we were well outside the Phoenix metropolitan area. After about an hour of driving north towards Sedona, I noticed that James was taking increasingly remote routes, avoiding the main highways and heading into desert areas with minimal traffic. The conversation gradually shifted from business opportunities to more personal topics, with Ryan reminiscing about our childhood and James sharing stories about his own family background. You know, Marcus, Ryan said, turning around to face me from the front passenger seat. I've always been grateful for how you supported me after my football career ended. You really saved my life during those difficult years. Family takes care of family, I replied, wondering if he felt any genuine remorse about what they were planning to do. That's what makes this so hard, Ryan continued, and for the first time that evening, his voice carried what sounded like genuine emotion. Makes what hard? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. James answered for him. Marcus, we need you to know that what's about to happen isn't personal. It's just business. What's about to happen? We've been systematically transferring your assets to offshore accounts for the past 18 months, James explained with the same calm professionalism he might use to discuss quarterly earnings. By now, we control approximately $400 million in liquid assets, plus equity positions in several international partnerships. I stared at him, pretending to be shocked, even though I already knew the full scope of their financial crimes. You've been stealing from the company? We've been optimizing asset allocation, James corrected. The company was generating more cash than it could efficiently deploy, so we've been investing those resources in higher yield opportunities. That's theft, I said. That's capitalism, James replied. You created valuable technology, but you lack the sophistication to maximize its financial potential. We're simply ensuring that the resources generate appropriate returns. Ryan looked genuinely uncomfortable with James's cold explanation of their crimes. Mark, we never wanted it to come to this. We hoped you would just focus on technology development and let us handle the business side without asking too many questions. But you started investigating the financial transfers, James continued, and that created a problem for our ongoing operations. I realized they were building toward their final justification for whatever they planned to do to me. So you decided to kill me? We decided to solve the problem in the most efficient way possible, James said. Tragic accidents happen to entrepreneurs under stress all the time, especially when they make poor decisions about traveling alone in dangerous areas. We had been driving for over 2 hours now, and I could see that we were in extremely remote desert territory. The nearest town was probably 50 miles in any direction, and there were no other vehicles on the narrow road James was following. Where are we going? I asked. There's an old mining operation about 20 miles ahead, James explained. It's been abandoned for decades, but the access roads are still passable. Unfortunately, it's also the kind of place where people sometimes get lost and never found. Ryan was staring out the passenger window, avoiding eye contact with me. I could see him struggling with the reality of what they were about to do, but not enough to actually stop it from happening. Ryan, I said, appealing directly to whatever family loyalty might remain in him. You don't have to do this. We can work out the financial issues. You're my brother. He finally turned to look at me, and I could see tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry, but it's too late to go back now. It's never too late, I insisted. Just tell James to turn around, and we can figure out how to resolve this. Actually, James interjected, it is too late. The financial crimes we've committed are serious enough to result in decades in federal prison. The only way to avoid those consequences is to eliminate the primary witness. There are other witnesses, I pointed out. Accountants, bank employees, business partners. Killing me won't eliminate all the evidence. No, James agreed, but it will eliminate the person most motivated to pursue prosecution and most knowledgeable about the full scope of our activities. Without your testimony, most of the evidence becomes circumstantial. His clinical analysis of my murder was terrifying in its logical precision. He had clearly thought through all the angles and concluded that killing me was the most practical solution to his legal problems. We drove in tense silence for another 20 minutes before James turned onto an unmarked dirt road that led into increasingly rough terrain. The SUV bounced and lurched over rocks and washouts as we climbed into hills dotted with abandoned mining equipment and rusted industrial debris. Finally, James stopped the vehicle near what appeared to be the entrance to an old mine shaft. In the moonlight, I could see the skeletal remains of mining structures and piles of discarded equipment that hadn't been touched in decades. End of the road, James announced, turning off the engine. Literally, Ryan added with a hollow laugh that sounded more like a sob. James got out of the SUV and walked around to open my door. Time to get out, Marcus. I stepped out of the vehicle, my heart pounding, but my mind clear about what I needed to do. The GPS tracker in my shoe was still broadcasting my location, and the recording devices I was wearing were capturing everything James and Ryan said. So what's the plan? I asked. You're going to shoot me and claim I disappeared during a business trip? Nothing that dramatic, James replied. Industrial accidents happen all the time at abandoned mining sites. People fall down shafts, get trapped under unstable structures, or simply get lost in dangerous terrain. He gestured toward the mine entrance. That shaft is probably 300 feet deep, with water at the bottom. Your body would never be found, and there would be no evidence of foul play. Just a successful entrepreneur who made poor decisions about exploring dangerous areas alone, Ryan added, his voice shaking. Except I'm not alone, I pointed out. You're both here as witnesses. Actually, James said, pulling something from his jacket, according to the story we'll tell, we dropped you off at a hotel in Sedona yesterday evening. You said you wanted to do some hiking and exploring on your own before our business meetings. We never saw you again. The object in his hand was a pistol. Not to shoot me, I realized, but to threaten me into compliance with whatever method of murder they had planned. Walk toward the mine entrance, James ordered, pointing the gun at my chest. I began walking slowly in the direction he indicated, buying time and hoping my security team was tracking my location accurately. The abandoned mining site was vast, with multiple shafts and structures that could easily conceal evidence of violent crimes. You know, I said, trying to keep them talking, you could still change your minds about this. The financial crimes are serious, but they're not worth spending your lives in prison for murder. We're not going to prison, James replied confidently. We've planned this very carefully, and there won't be enough evidence to connect us to your disappearance. What about all the emails between you and Ryan discussing the plan? I'm sure law enforcement will find those eventually. James laughed. Those emails were automatically deleted from our servers months ago, and even if copies exist somewhere, they only discuss financial activities, not any plans to harm you. He was wrong about that, but I didn't want to reveal how much I actually knew about their communications. The emails I had copied included explicit discussions of murder, but James apparently didn't remember everything he had written. Besides, Ryan added, even if there were suspicious communications, they would just prove that we were involved in financial crimes, not that we killed you. Your disappearance will be treated as a separate incident. We had reached the edge of the mine shaft, and I could see that it dropped into absolute darkness. The opening was about 8 feet across, surrounded by rotting wooden supports and rusted metal equipment. It was exactly the kind of place where someone could disappear forever. Any last words? James asked, raising the pistol to a more threatening angle. Actually, yes, I said. I want you both to know that I recorded everything you said during the drive here. Every confession about the financial crimes, every detail about your plan to murder me. James's expression changed immediately from confident control to concerned uncertainty. That's impossible. We searched you before leaving the office. No, you didn't, I pointed out. You were too focused on maintaining the pretense that this was a legitimate business trip. I pulled out my phone, which had been recording audio throughout the entire evening. 3 hours of confession, including explicit admissions of theft, conspiracy, and premeditated murder. Ryan's face went white. Mark, please, we can work something out. Actually, I continued, the recording is already backed up to cloud storage and scheduled to be automatically sent to law enforcement if I don't check in within the next 2 hours. James raised the gun directly at my head. Give me the phone. Even if you destroy the phone, you can't stop the automatic uploads, I told him. The only way to prevent the evidence from reaching the authorities is to let me go and check in with my security team. Security team? Ryan asked. Did you really think I would come out here alone without backup? I laughed, feeling more confident as I realized their plan was falling apart. I've had private security monitoring both of you for weeks. They know exactly where we are and what you've been planning. James looked around nervously, as if expecting to see armed security personnel emerging from behind the abandoned mining equipment. You're bluffing. Am I? Then why don't you just shoot me and find out what happens next? The standoff continued for several long minutes, with James pointing the gun at me while trying to decide whether I was telling the truth about the security arrangements. Ryan stood beside him, clearly terrified about the implications of being connected to my murder. We need to think about this, Ryan finally said. If he's telling the truth about the recordings and security team, killing him will just make everything worse. If we don't kill him, we're going to prison for the financial crimes anyway, James replied. At least this way, we have a chance of getting away with everything. But if we do kill him and he's telling the truth about the evidence, we'll be facing murder charges instead of just financial crimes, Ryan argued. That's the difference between 10 years in prison and life sentences. I could see James wavering, uncertain about whether to proceed with the murder or try to find some other solution. The gun remained pointed at me, but his hand was shaking slightly with indecision. That's when I heard the sound of helicopters approaching from the south. Sounds like my security team found us, I said, though I was actually surprised by how quickly they had responded to my GPS signal. James spun around, looking toward the sound of the approaching aircraft, and I took advantage of his momentary distraction to dive behind a pile of rusted mining equipment. The gun discharged as I moved, but the bullet went wide, striking sparks off metal debris instead of hitting me. FBI, drop your weapons and put your hands up! The voice came from a loudspeaker on one of the helicopters, which was now hovering directly overhead, with a powerful searchlight illuminating the entire mining site. 2 additional helicopters were landing nearby, disgorging teams of armed federal agents. James fired 2 more shots in my direction before apparently realizing the futility of his situation. He dropped the gun and raised his hands as FBI agents surrounded the area. Ryan was already on the ground with his hands behind his head, sobbing and calling out that he surrendered. Marcus Thompson, an agent called out. Are you injured? I'm okay, I shouted back from behind the mining equipment. The suspects are both disarmed. As FBI agents secured James and Ryan, I emerged from my hiding place and tried to process what had just happened. My own brother and business partner had driven me into the desert with the intention of murdering me to cover up their financial crimes. The lead FBI agent, a woman named Special Agent Martinez, approached me as paramedics checked me for injuries. Mr. Thompson, we've been investigating financial irregularities at your company for several weeks. When your security team contacted us about tonight's situation, we were able to mobilize quickly. How long have you known about the embezzlement? I asked. We received a tip about suspicious international transfers about a month ago, she explained. Our financial crimes unit has been building a case, but we needed more evidence to proceed with arrests. Well, now you have 3 hours of recorded confessions, I said, handing her my phone. Agent Martinez smiled. That should make our job significantly easier. As James and Ryan were loaded into separate helicopters for transport back to Phoenix, James looked at me with undisguised hatred. You think you've won, he shouted over the noise of the rotors, but you have no idea how deep this goes. We weren't working alone. Agent Martinez made a note of his statement. We'll be very interested in learning about any additional co-conspirators, she told me. Ryan's reaction was completely different. As they walked him past me toward one of the helicopters, he stopped and looked directly at me. Mark, I know this doesn't mean anything now, but I really am sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. I was so jealous of your success, and James made it seem like we were just taking money that you'd never miss. I stared at my brother, trying to find some remnant of the boy I'd grown up with, but all I could see was a stranger who had been willing to kill me for money. I trusted you, I said simply, with everything, and you tried to murder me. I know, he replied, tears streaming down his face. I know, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. No, I corrected him. You'll have to live with that for the rest of your prison sentence. The flight back to Phoenix gave me time to think about everything that had happened. The betrayal was so comprehensive and devastating that I could barely process it emotionally. But I also felt an unexpected sense of relief that the threat was finally over. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of James and Ryan's conspiracy. They had stolen over $400 million from Greenhash and Crypto Global, using sophisticated financial instruments and offshore accounts to hide their crimes. More shocking, James had apparently run similar schemes against 3 other technology companies over the past decade, always targeting successful founders who lacked business experience. Patterson is essentially a professional predator, Agent Martinez explained during one of our debriefing sessions. He identifies successful entrepreneurs with valuable companies but limited business sophistication, then infiltrates their organizations and systematically drains their assets. What about Ryan? I asked. Was he involved in the other cases? No, your brother appears to have been recruited specifically for this operation because of his family connection to you, she replied. Patterson needed an inside contact who could provide detailed information about your personality, decision-making patterns, and vulnerabilities. The realization that Ryan had essentially sold me out to a serial financial predator was somehow even more painful than learning about the conspiracy itself. My own brother had provided the intelligence that enabled James to manipulate me so effectively. The legal proceedings took over 2 years to complete. James was eventually sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for financial crimes, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Evidence from his other victims helped establish a pattern of predatory behavior that enhanced his sentence. Ryan received 18 years, with some reduction for cooperating with investigators and helping to recover stolen assets. His testimony revealed details about James's methods that helped law enforcement identify and assist other victims. During Ryan's sentencing hearing, he asked to make a statement directly to me. "Marcus, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it," he said, his voice breaking. "I just want you to know that the person who did these terrible things isn't the brother you grew up with. I became someone I don't recognize, someone motivated by jealousy and greed instead of love and loyalty." He paused, struggling to control his emotions. "I threw away the most important relationship in my life for money I didn't earn and didn't deserve. That's going to haunt me forever, whether I'm in prison or not." I didn't respond during the hearing, but I felt a complex mixture of anger, sadness, and something that might have been pity. The Ryan who had conspired to murder me was indeed different from the brother I remembered, but I would never know which version was more authentic. The financial recovery process was complicated, but ultimately successful. Federal investigators and forensic accountants were able to trace and recover most of the stolen assets, though legal fees and the disruption to business operations cost millions in additional losses. More importantly, the criminal investigation revealed that Crypto Global's due diligence process had been inadequate, failing to detect the financial irregularities that should have been obvious to experienced auditors. The company agreed to a substantial settlement that compensated Greenhash for the damages caused by their negligent oversight. I used the recovered funds and settlement money to start a new company focused on renewable energy storage systems, applying the lessons I'd learned about both technology innovation and business security. The new organization, called Resilient Energy, implemented sophisticated financial controls and background screening procedures designed to prevent the kind of infiltration that had nearly destroyed Greenhash. "You've built something impressive here," Patricia Morrison told me during a board meeting at Resilient Energy 2 years after the criminal trials concluded. "But more than that, you've shown remarkable resilience in rebuilding after such a devastating betrayal." The experience had indeed changed me in fundamental ways. I was more cautious about trusting people, more involved in financial oversight, and more aware of the sophisticated methods criminals use to exploit successful businesses. But I refused to let the betrayal make me cynical or prevent me from building meaningful relationships with honest people. The hardest part of recovery was dealing with the family implications. My parents were devastated by Ryan's crimes and struggled to understand how their younger son had become capable of attempted murder. The family gatherings that had once been sources of joy became awkward affairs where Ryan's absence dominated every conversation. "I keep thinking about signs we should have noticed," my mother said during one particularly difficult dinner. "Ways we could have prevented this or helped Ryan before it went so far." "There were no signs," I assured her. "James Patterson is a professional manipulator who knew exactly how to exploit Ryan's weaknesses. This wasn't something you could have prevented." But privately, I wondered if I had contributed to Ryan's resentment by always being the successful brother, the one who achieved wealth and recognition, while Ryan struggled with career disappointments and financial problems. Our parents' obvious pride in my accomplishments might have intensified his feelings of inadequacy and jealousy. 3 years after the trials, I received an unexpected letter from Ryan in federal prison. He was participating in educational and counseling programs, working toward a degree in social work with the goal of helping other inmates prepare for reintegration into society. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did and why I did it," he wrote. "The counselors here help inmates understand how we rationalize destructive behavior and learn to take responsibility for our choices." He described the psychological process that had led him to betray me, starting with childhood jealousy that intensified over the years as my success contrasted with his failures. When James approached him with the proposition, Ryan had convinced himself that I owed him something for all the years when I had been the favored son. I told myself that you had been lucky with your technology skills, while I had been unlucky with my injury and career setbacks, he continued. James fed those resentments and made the financial crime seem like just taking what should have been shared more equally between us. The letter went on for several pages, providing insights into his thinking that were both illuminating and disturbing. Ryan had essentially rewritten our family history in his mind, transforming my academic and professional achievements into unfair advantages that justified his criminal behavior. The hardest thing to accept is that none of that was true, he concluded. You worked incredibly hard for everything you achieved, and you were always generous in helping me when I struggled. I repaid that generosity by trying to destroy you. I never responded to the letter, but I kept it as a reminder of how envy and resentment can corrupt even family relationships. Ryan's explanation helped me understand his motivations, but it didn't change the fact that he had been willing to kill me for money. Today, 5 years after that night in the Nevada desert, I run a successful clean energy company with careful security measures and trusted partners who have proven their loyalty over time. Resilient Energy employs over 300 people and operates renewable energy storage facilities across 6 states, helping to make clean electricity more reliable and affordable. I've never married or started a family, partly because the betrayal damaged my ability to trust deeply, but also because I've become focused on building something larger than personal relationships. The company's mission, advancing renewable energy technology to combat climate change, feels more urgent and meaningful than pursuing traditional personal milestones. The experience taught me that surviving the worst betrayal possible can actually be liberating. When you face people trying to kill you and come through it stronger, most other challenges seem manageable by comparison. Business competitors, regulatory obstacles, and technical setbacks are simply problems to be solved rather than existential threats. I've also learned that trust, once broken catastrophically, can be rebuilt deliberately and selectively. I maintain careful relationships with business partners, employees, and friends, but those relationships are based on demonstrated reliability over time, rather than assumptions about loyalty or good intentions. The desert didn't kill me because I had more to do in this world. Building better technology, creating jobs for honest people, advancing solutions to environmental challenges, and proving that innovation and integrity can triumph over manipulation and greed. Sometimes our greatest strength is revealed only after we've been broken and forced to rebuild from nothing. The nerdy kid from Phoenix who worked nights to pay for college became someone who could survive attempted murder and emerge with renewed purpose. That's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're facing betrayal, business challenges, or just trying to navigate a complicated world where not everyone has your best interests at heart. Trust carefully, prepare for the worst, but never stop building something worth fighting for. What doesn't kill you doesn't always make you stronger, but sometimes it makes you clearer about what really matters and who deserves your trust. The desert taught me that survival isn't about having perfect conditions. It's about using whatever resources you have, no matter how limited, to keep moving towards something better. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. Epilogue, 5 years later. The annual Renewable Energy Conference in Denver has become one of the most important events in my calendar. This year, I'm delivering the keynote address about the future of energy storage technology, standing before an audience of 3,000 engineers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers who are working to transform how the world generates and consumes electricity. As I look out at the crowd, I think about the journey that brought me here. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me ultimately led to deeper insights about both human nature and business leadership. Resilient Energy's success isn't just measured in revenue or market share, but in the positive impact we're having on communities that need clean, reliable electricity. After my presentation, a young entrepreneur approaches me with questions about starting a renewable energy company. She reminds me of myself 15 years ago, brilliant, passionate about technology, but naive about the potential dangers of rapid business growth. What's the most important advice you can give someone just starting out? She asks. I think for a moment about everything I've learned. Build something that matters to you personally, not just financially. Surround yourself with people whose values align with yours, and always remember that the people closest to you have the power to hurt you most. So choose those relationships very carefully. She looks puzzled by the last part of my advice, probably expecting something more conventionally business-focused. But someday she might understand why protecting yourself from betrayal is just as important as developing great technology or finding the right market opportunities. As I leave the conference, I receive a notification on my phone about a new message. It's from Agent Martinez, who has remained in contact over the years as her financial crimes unit has continued investigating similar cases. Thought you'd want to know, her message reads. We just arrested another tech entrepreneur who was using James Patterson's methods to defraud clean energy companies. Your case helped us identify the pattern and stop him before he could do as much damage as Patterson did to you. I feel a sense of satisfaction that our experience has helped protect other entrepreneurs from similar predators. The investigation and trials were painful, but they created a body of knowledge that law enforcement can use to identify and stop sophisticated financial criminals. That evening, alone in my hotel room, I allow myself to think about Ryan for the first time in months. According to the latest information I have, he's scheduled for release in 8 more years and has maintained his involvement in educational and counseling programs. I wonder sometimes whether I'll ever see him again, whether there's any possibility of rebuilding a relationship after such a fundamental betrayal. The counselors I worked with after the trials suggested that forgiveness might eventually be possible, but I've never felt any urgency to explore that possibility. Some wounds are too deep to heal completely, and some betrayals too profound to forgive. But I've learned that you can build a meaningful life around even the deepest scars, as long as you're willing to keep moving forward towards something worthwhile. The desert taught me that survival isn't just about enduring difficult circumstances. It's about using those circumstances to discover strengths you didn't know you had. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to prove that you're stronger than whatever tries to destroy you. That's the real story here, not the betrayal itself, but what happened afterward. How someone can lose everything they thought they could trust and still find ways to build something better. The Marcus Thompson who walked into that desert 5 years ago was naive about human nature and overly trusting in family loyalty. The person who emerged was more cautious, but also more determined, more aware of danger, but also more committed to making a positive difference in the world. I wouldn't choose to repeat the experience, but I also wouldn't change how it ended. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us create space for the best things we'll ever accomplish. And that ultimately is how you survive betrayal. Not by avoiding trust altogether, but by learning to trust more wisely and to build something so meaningful that no individual betrayal can destroy your sense of purpose. The work continues.